Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Two great guests today for 2 hours of open forum. Second hour, Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press, will be here. This hour, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Your calls welcome, 888-318-7884. As always, anyone can call. It's called Catholic Answers, but you don't have to be Catholic to call. 888-318-7884. In addition to being senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, of course, Jimmy is the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hello, Jimmy.
Hello, Cy Kellett.
And how's the Mysterious World going?
The Mysterious World turns.
It does. It does indeed. And I haven't listened yet to the guy that went to the 40th century or wherever he went.
Paul Amadeus Dana.
Yeah. But what drops tomorrow?
Tomorrow is a Patrons Questions episode. So our patrons get to ask us questions, and we're going to be talking about, if memory serves, I know we talk about Neanderthals and their relationship to humans. We talk about, I believe, time travel and all kinds of other interesting things.
Very good. I'm surprised. Time travel, Jimmy. I'm shocked.
People ask about it.
888-318-7884 is our number here. 888-318-7884. You're welcome to call with any question at all. If there's something about the Catholic faith that either perplexes you or you're interested in or you're curious about, you can call. But, of course, when Jimmy's here, the topics are pretty wide. You got a moral question. You got a philosophical question. You even got a scientific question. 888-318-7884. Let me just tell you, though, already we're down to 2 lines open. So, and that we're a minute in. So that's how it happens when Jimmy's here. So dial now, 888-31-TRUTH. You all ready for the conference? You know what you're talking about, the conference?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus, maybe?
I am talking about Jesus.
I thought that. Is your talk the one where you kind of you're giving us the overview?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since I'm doing the overview that, it's like the core topic that all of the others fit around, I would have put it first, but they've got it almost last. It's like Saturday morning.
Well, maybe they're thinking there's probably going to be some stuff Jimmy's going to need to correct. We'll let him go last and fix that.
Maybe. We'll see.
I don't know. 888-318-7884. I don't like to keep people waiting when there's so many on the line, but let's go to Francisco in San Antonio, Texas. Francisco, thanks for calling. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Mr. Akin. I was wondering if earrings and tattoos are sinful since they damage our bodies without doing us any good.
So the argument here is one that involves a concept known as mutilation. And we're not supposed to mutilate our bodies, but the way that Catholic moral theology classically understands mutilation is it isn't any change. It's a change that harms us in some way. It's not mutilation to do changes that help us in some way. Like, for example, if you have, like the Pope recently did, if you have a part of your intestine that's damaged, he had diverticulosis, it can be legitimate to cut out that part so that your body can function the way it should. So in this case, Francisco is asking about, he's posing an argument that I don't know that he thinks this, but he's considering this argument anyway,
right,
where tattoos and earrings would not help us. Well, they might not in particular cases, and in those cases I would say, well, then definitely don't get them. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean they intrinsically do us no good, because let's take the case of earrings. Well, a lot of times, especially as a younger man, perhaps Cy Kellett, you might have seen a woman who was wearing earrings at a party or something, and they were attractive and enhanced her beauty.
Yeah, sparkly, shiny. Yeah. That's how I was when I was young.
Yeah, so in that case, they would be doing something good for her. They would be helping her look attractive.
Oh, yeah.
And earrings, we're talking about pierced ears in this case, because clip-ons don't affect your body. But I mean, if you have clip-on earrings, they're not altering your body. But if you had pierced ears and you then wore earrings that enhanced your attractiveness or signaled your religious identity or did any number of other potentially beneficial things, then the argument that Francisco is considering wouldn't apply to them. What about tattoos? Well, certainly there are tattoos that people can get that will not help them out. You know, you get Dancing Satan tattooed on your arm. That's not helping you out.
Right.
At least in most circumstances. But that's not going to apply to all tattoos, once more. In fact, in various Eastern Catholic and Eastern Christian traditions, it's common to have a little tattoo of the cross sometimes on your hand, but elsewhere also possibly, as a way of reminding yourself of your Christian identity and of your need to use your body for God's glory, and as a way of signaling that you are a Christian to other people. And so in that case, the tattoo would definitely be doing you some good. So I would say, Francisco, that there's no one-size-fits-all rule here. It doesn't qualify. Tattoos and pierced ears under ordinary circumstances do not qualify as mutilation, and whether or not it's advisable to wear particular earrings or get particular tattoos is going to depend on the nature of the case. Some of them would not benefit you, but others could.
Thanks, Francisco. Appreciate that very, very much. It does seems like we get that. It does seem like
Comes up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah,
the tattoos one.
The tattoo one, but it also seems like it's related to the fact that there's just more and more people getting tattoos, and I wonder.
Oh,
maybe
you
know
noticed.
this. Is this a cyclical thing? Like, has there been in 1840s everybody was getting tattoos, or is this just maybe
Yeah.
the technology got to the point where it's very convenient now to.
One of the things about social trends and fashion, which is really what this is a matter of, is fashion.
Yeah.
One of the things about fashion that sociologists have noted is that they tend to rise and fall in cyclical waves, like a sine wave. And that happens with baby names, which are fashions.
Right.
It happens with hemlines on dresses.
Right.
It happens with facial hair on men. It happens
Right.
with tattoos as well. Back in the World War II generation, for example, there were a lot of men who had tattoos. My grandfather was one of them. In my generation, not nearly so much. But
Right.
then in the generation that grew up after me, a lot more again.
Yeah.
And so you can expect fashion trends to play out like that. And there are reasons for that. One of the reasons is people in the middle class frequently, at least historically, will imitate people in the upper class. And so when the middle class starts imitating, and people tend to imitate the class above them, whatever that is.
Right.
So, for example, when middle class people start imitating upper class fashions, the upper class people need to do something else
To show that they're upper class.
that they're upper class. And so, but there's only so far you can go with fashion. There's only so long or so high
Right.
that hemlines can be. There's only so much or so little facial hair you can have. And so that's what creates or at least contributes to these cyclical fashion waves.
That makes a great deal of sense. Francisco, thanks very much for the question. Let's go to Trent in New York, listening on Catholic.com. Were you where all the rain was there in New York, Trent?
Yeah, I was. Thanks for taking my call, by the way, but thankfully my family and friends all made it through okay.
Yeah, lots of prayers for the folks in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. It's really wild what happened. Go ahead, Trent, with your question.
Okay, so Jimmy Bar Jimmy, my question is, do you believe that there's any evidence to suggest that angels are derived from Zoroastrian traditions, or at least typical Christian conceptions of angels, such as them having names and personalities, or guardian angels, could those be derived from Fravashi?
So the evidence that I'm aware of would indicate that Hebrews had concepts of angels prior to encountering Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism is a religion, for people who may not be familiar, that was actually historically very common. Today it's much rarer, but it's still around. But it's native to Iraq, to modern Iraq or ancient Mesopotamia. And it has some similarities with Christianity. Now, sometimes you'll hear Zoroastrianism characterized as dualist. to where you have like two equal and opposed gods, one good, one evil. That's really not the case. Zoroastrianism actually is monotheist. It believes in one great God, and then he's opposed by a lesser being that is evil and who will ultimately be defeated.
Oh.
Now, does that sound like
sounds
any
very
other
familiar.
religions you can think of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I might be in one of those.
So when Jewish people at the time of the Babylonian exile began to encounter Zoroastrians, they talked with them, and it's like, hey, we're kind of on the same page about a bunch of stuff. And so there has been scholarly speculation that Zoroastrian ideas influenced some later Hebrew authors and vice versa. In terms of angels, I would say that the evidence is that Hebrews had concepts of angels long before they encountered Zoroastrianism, long before the Babylonian exile. And that's not surprising because angels are basically mid-level spirits in the invisible world. They're under God, but they're superior to humans. So they're basically mid-level spirits. And, well, that's a concept that every culture has. Every culture has an idea of the spirit world with spirits of varying levels of power and authority in it. And so every culture has something equivalent to angels, whether they call them that or something else. In terms of could Zoroastrian ideas have influenced particular depictions of angels, either in the Bible or in Jewish tradition outside of the Bible, which then could have influenced the way Christians sometimes envision angels? It's not impossible, but I am not aware of any particular evidence for it. It's not a question I've studied closely. There might or might not be evidence for that proposition, and I would have to consider it open-mindedly, but certainly the concept of angels did not come from Zoroastrianism. That's not how Christianity or Judaism got the idea.
Thanks, Trent. We got to take a break, so I'll leave it there and hope that was helpful to you. There'll be one line open now, 888-318-7884. More Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. A little bit of groovy music for you on this Thursday afternoon here in California. Maybe it's Thursday evening, maybe it's a Wednesday morning wherever you are. I have no idea why Brandon looks so mad. Is this some system not working in there, Brandon? It's everything. Well, it all seems to be going fine.
The groovy
from
music
here.
worked.
Thank you very much for the groovy music. Hey, we've got the 20 Answers Challenge still on. We're really proud of these 47 books in the 20 Answers series. 20 answers on all different topics having to do with Catholic apologetics. And you can get the whole set of them, all 47 books, 65% off right now at shop.catholic.com. The whole set, 65% off, shop.catholic.com. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Open forum continues. We go now to Midland, Texas. Ryan, our old friend in Midland, Texas. Thanks for calling, Ryan. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right, I want to ask, Jimmy, why does the Douay-Rheims Old Testament list a third and fourth book of Kings?
Because it's an alternative numbering or alternative set of designations for some books that are in other Bibles. We have this sequence of 6 historical books, and in most Bibles today, they're called 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and then 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And the first 4 of those, 1st Samuel to 2nd Kings, all deal with the monarchy in Israel. In 1 Samuel, we have the establishment of the monarchy with King Saul, then we progress through to King David and Solomon and into the other kings. So because this block of 4 books all deals with kings, in some versions of the Bible, including the Douay-Rheims, they're all referred to as the books of Kings. And so 1 Samuel becomes 1 Kings on this reckoning. 2 Samuel becomes 2 Kings. 1 Kings becomes 3 Kings. And 2 Kings becomes 4 Kings. And all of them deal with the history of Israel's monarchy. And so as a result, they all get called the books of Kings in this reckoning. But really, 3rd and 4th Kings are the same thing as what are called 1st and 2nd Kings in other Bibles. It's just a difference of name.
Ryan, thanks. Thanks very much. We continue on. Very busy day, as always happens when Jimmy's here. Let's go to Thomas in Noonan, Georgia, listening on Catholic.com. Thomas, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Mr. Kellett, Mr. Akin. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to, Thomas.
I'm an agnostic, and I have a question concerning Catholics' belief of free will.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to pose it to you this way. Imagine my father said to me, Thomas, if you don't live your life the way I say you should, I'll kill you. If I obey him, am I doing it out of my own free will?
Well, it's going to depend on how you define the term free will. If you mean, could you have chosen otherwise, then yes, you would be obeying him out of free will. If you mean, did he exert any kind of influence, in other words, was this a freedom completely uninformed by any other considerations? Well, then no, it wouldn't be free in that sense. It's going to depend on what you mean by freedom.
Well, what I'm saying is, how do we have free will when we either have to choose between obeying God or going to hell?
Well, so one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that, as I said, there are different kinds of freedom, and it is not required for what most people would call freedom that it be consequenceless. I mean, for example, we regard America as a free country, but if you commit murder, and you get caught, you're gonna go to jail at the least. And that law is something that people are generally aware of. If you commit murder, there are going to be consequences. But we wouldn't say that you lack free will because the law says that there will be consequences if you commit murder. It's still up to you to decide, are you going to commit murder or not? And in the same way, if God says, I've given you freedom, but here are the consequences, pro and con, to what will happen depending on how you use that free will, people would still generally say, well, okay, then you have free will. You have a genuine ability to choose what you're going to do, and it's an informed choice because you have knowledge of the consequences ahead of time.
That makes sense. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Thomas. Really appreciate the call. Thank you very, very much. Sometimes lately I've been feeling like we invite non-Catholics to call, but not as many taking us up on the invitation. So it's very nice to have you make that call, Thomas. Let's go to Austin in New York, watching on YouTube. You survived the rain, Austin?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know there was like this whole rain thing. My roof was leaking, so I was wondering what was up with that.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're all right. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right. So let's say your whole life you go to confession and make it your business to confess mortal sins, and you die, but you forgot a mortal sin.
Mm-hmm.
Does that forgotten mortal sin merit purgatory?
Well, the answer is there's not a single answer to this, because if you forgot a mortal sin and you didn't ever repent of it, so it's like, oh yeah, I murdered someone, and you never turned your will away from that and said, wow, I shouldn't have murdered someone. I wish I hadn't done that. Even though it receded into the depths of your memory and didn't come to mind again before you died, if you still had knowingly and willfully murdered someone and never turned your back on that, never turned your will away from that act of murder, then you would not be saved. You would not go to heaven or purgatory. On the other hand, if you had repented and simply forgotten to mention it in confession, then you would have been forgiven of it, and whether there would be some purgatory that you needed to experience or not would be a decision that ultimately God would make, but your salvation would be assured either way. As long as you don't willfully hold back a sin that you've repented of in confession, then you will end up being absolved, and there may or may not be remaining consequences that need to be taken care of in purgatory.
All right. Thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, Austin, thank you. Thanks very much. Going to the Philippines now. James in the Philippines watching on Facebook Live. James, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, sorry, Jimmy. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. All right. Good morning. We're not quite to that morning yet. We haven't hit Friday morning yet.
From the future, that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
You got one of those tachyon telephones from the Philippines.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
So I was just rereading Brand Petry's Jesus and Jewish Roots of Mary, and also our favorite Mama's Boys book, Behold Thy Mother. And I do accept that Mary is sinless, but I just can't connect that to her not experiencing birth pains. Mm-hmm. Is it something that we Catholics are required to believe? Is it a dogma?
No.
And what evidence do we have to, what?
Okay. So what Catholics are required to believe, that is a matter of dogma, is that Mary was a perpetual virgin. And that means she was a virgin before the conception of Jesus and at all points after the conception of Jesus, including when she gave birth to Jesus and throughout the rest of her life. Now, what that means in terms of what happened in the act of giving birth is something that is a matter of theology rather than a matter of dogma. And so theologians can and have taken different approaches to what happened during her act of giving birth to Jesus. And some have proposed that she had a miraculous birth that did not involve any pain, but others have said that's not required by Catholic doctrine. For example, the late Cardinal Avery Dulles indicated that. Yeah. And so one can take different positions on the question of, did she experience pain in the act of giving birth to Jesus? That's not a matter that is determined by Catholic doctrine or dogma. In terms of, now you asked for evidence regarding why she might have a painless birth. And I would say that the evidence that I'm aware of, the earliest evidence that I'm aware of dates to the 1st century. And there's a document known as the Ascension of Isaiah. I've done a careful study of the dating of this document. It looks like it was written in the year AD 67. So quite early indeed. And it records a tradition that Mary had a miraculous birth where Jesus passed through her womb in a big display of light without any actual normal birth process. And so since the birth process was circumvented in this case, she didn't experience any labor pains. And there are other early Christian documents that indicate the same thing. So that would be evidence of a quite early period that would indicate this. But like I said, it's not a matter of Catholic doctrine, and so it's something on which there can be a variety of opinions.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that call from Friday morning in the Philippines. We're going to continue with Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this. Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. 2 hours of open forum today. You can call about anything you'd like to ask about, and anybody can call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. You're welcome here. 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour, and that usually means phones full, and it still means phones full.
Okay. Well, then let's do our best to empty some.
Let's try to empty them. Michael in Florida, you're next, watching on YouTube. Thanks, Michael, for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. My question is, in the book of Daniel, chapter 10, verse 5, is it understood that the being that speaks to Daniel could be Jesus? And if it is, does he appear anywhere else in the Old Testament in physical form?
Okay, so let's do the second question first, because it's a bit easier to handle, or can be handled a bit more concisely, I should say. There are speculations that you will find from the age of the Church Fathers onward about Jesus appearing in various Old Testament passages. And when God appears in nature, whether it's as a natural force or as something like the burning bush or as a person or a voice or whatever it may be, it's called a theophany, from the Greek words theos, meaning God, and epiphanes, which means manifest. So a theophany is where God manifests in the natural world somehow. When Christ does it, it's often called a Christophany, for Christ manifesting. And there are various theologians and church fathers who have looked at different passages in Scripture and said, oh, I think this is the pre-incarnate Christ. I think this is a Christophany. And passages that they tend to do that for are ones where the angel of the Lord is said to appear, because at various points the angel of the Lord seems to be identified with the Lord, but also be distinct from the Lord somehow. He's obviously a high-ranking messenger coming from God, and Jesus is God's most highest-ranking messenger to the world ever. So there's some logic there. Another candidate that has been proposed, another passage that's like that, is in the book of Joshua, where the commander of the Lord's heavenly army shows up and in human form. And obviously, the commander of the Lord's army in heaven would seem to be maybe the highest-ranking angel or the highest-ranking person in heaven, the highest-ranking messenger to humanity. And so some people have said, I think the commander of the Lord's army may be the pre-incarnate Christ. So you do have these speculations. In terms of Daniel 10, I understand why one might suppose that it's Jesus speaking to Daniel. To read just a little bit from it, starting in verse 5 of Daniel 10, Daniel says, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like topaz, his face was like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice sounded like the sound of a multitude. Cy Kellett, can you think of any books of the Bible where Jesus is described in language strikingly similar to that? Maybe late in the Bible, maybe very late in the Bible.
Not Revelations.
Not Revelation?
But Revelation.
Well, Revelation, yes. So if you look in Revelation, there is a description that is clearly Jesus that is very, very much like this. And so it could be reasonable to look at Daniel 10 and say, well, I think this is Jesus. So one would want to consider that as a possibility. And I think it is a possibility. But we also need to look at the passage and say, well, is there anything in this that would suggest it might not be Jesus? And if you keep reading, one of the things you find out is that this figure that is appearing to Daniel was delayed in getting here. Daniel had prayed 21 days earlier, and this is the answer to his prayer. And in verse 12, the being tells him, do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns times yet to come. And he goes on to say that once he leaves, he and Michael are going to trounce the prince of Persia, and then the prince of Greece is going to come after that. Now, what we're talking about here are the heavenly princes. These are the princely angels that God has put in charge of different nations, like the angelic prince of Persia, the angelic prince of Greece, and Michael, the angelic prince of Israel. So you have this conflict going on in the heavens. And an argument against this being Jesus would be the fact that the prince of Persia was able to stop him.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to get here on his own. He was detained by the prince of Persia, and he needed Michael to come help him. And so if you look in the passage, there are indications that could suggest it's Jesus, but there are also indications that would point against it being Jesus. And what opinion you ultimately come to will depend on your reading of the data.
Okay, Michael?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. 888-318-7884, our number. Now we go to Jonah in Williamsburg, Virginia, watching on YouTube. Jonah, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Where is the Garden of Eden? No.
I think the question was, where is the Garden of Eden now?
I think you said
and
now, yeah.
and the answer is that I don't think there is a Garden of Eden now. The book of Genesis tells us some things about where it would be, and it would seem to be somewhere in the Middle East, either in the nation of Iraq or in one of the other countries that's near Iraq, or it might be in the Persian Gulf today. At least that's the basic location where Genesis would suggest it would be. It would be somewhere in that part of the world. But we have explored that part of the world, and if it's underwater, it's not a garden anymore because trees don't live underwater. If it would be a site that's on land, then we've explored all of those lands, and we haven't found the Garden of Eden. So I don't think the garden is there these days. I don't think it's anywhere on Earth now.
Okay, Jonah?
Okay.
Jonah, how old are you?
Thank you.
Can
7.
You're 7? You did a great job, Jonah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call.
You're welcome.
Okay.
There we
Bye-bye,
go.
Jonah. Good job. Really good job. We got time. Let's go to Ryan in Wilmington, Delaware, watching on YouTube. Hi, Ryan. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. So I wanted to ask. So I've heard from online that from certain Jewish folks that the early Christians distorted the Old Testament in order to fit the narrative.
Okay. Well, anyone can make any claim they want. That doesn't mean you need to entertain it seriously. Did they give you any arguments or evidence for this claim?
No. Well, there wasn't any evidence or anything, but it just got me wondering.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I would say no, Christians did not tamper with the Old Testament. Now, it's going to depend on what you mean by that. If you mean changed the text of the Old Testament, that's something nobody had the ability to do because there were lots of copies of the Old Testament scriptures in circulation, and they were spread all over the Mediterranean world because Jewish people, many of them, were living outside of the Kingdom of Israel, and so they were all over the Mediterranean basin and points farther east as well. I mean, that's one of the reasons St. Paul, because he's determined to always preach to the Jews first and then go to the Gentiles, but he says he's going to Spain. You know, he talks about that in Romans. He wants to go to Spain, which is about as far west as you can go in Europe, and he's expecting to find Jews there that he can evangelize, and we know there were. In fact, there were Jews even farther, like in the British Isles and so forth. So there were Jewish people with copies either in Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek of the Jewish scriptures all over the place. And there was no central registry of scripture copies that you could go to and search, grab them and then forcibly modify them and put them back into circulation. So nobody, Christian or otherwise, had the ability to do a widespread change of texts to fit any particular agenda.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yes, thank you.
Ryan, I'll tell you what, if you want to hang on, Jimmy wrote a book called The Bible is a Catholic Book, which gives you a great introduction to where the Bible came from and how it got put together and all of that. If you'd like a copy of it, you just hang on, and Thomas will get your information, and we'll send you a copy of that. In the meantime, we have to go to a break. We'll take a quick break, be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kelly, your host. Having a lot of fun. Jimmy Akin's here. How bad could that be? And then coming up next, Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press, and it's open forum. Anybody can call with any question at all. 888-318.
I predict you will have a very relaxing next hour.
With Mark Brumley?
Yeah.
He's very mellow, huh?
He's very mellow, but I also predict you will not get through as many questions as we did this hour.
No, we will definitely not.
Yeah.
No.
I think Mark and I are both pretty mellow guys, but have some little different styles.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's some that we have a general, let's say, in the radio department, we generally know the speed with which each apologist moves.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you get through questions. Let's see. Ryan, who do we get? Where are we at? Detroit? No.
For Detroit or Florida would be fine. Sure.
Oh, well, let's do Luke in Florida watching on YouTube. We're coming to you, Jordan, in Detroit. Don't worry. Luke in Florida watching on YouTube. You are up next, Luke. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. I'm a big fan. Listened to your show a long time. My question is that the Catechism says angels are spiritual, non-corporal beings, but there's scriptures that seem to imply angels have some sort of body. For instance, when an angel wrestles with Jacob, or when Abraham and Sarah offered an angel cakes to eat. So how are we to understand the bodies of the angels in light of what the Catechism says about them being non-corporal?
Wow.
The way that this is classically understood is that angels are able to assume different forms in order to be able to interact with humanity, because they don't themselves have physical forms. They're created intellects, and so they're non-corporeal, meaning they don't have bodies natively. But they can manipulate human perception, and they can manipulate matter. And so between those two abilities, they could either assume a visual form, even though there's nothing physically there in a particular case, and a human would experience, in essence, a vision of interacting with an angel. But because they can also interact with matter, they could also manipulate matter in order to come up with a kind of temporary body for themselves. And medieval theologians, like St. Thomas Aquinas and others, would talk about these as aerial bodies, because the idea was they took the matter that's in the air and they fashioned it to make a temporary body for themselves. And then when they were done using the temporary body, they would let it dissolve back into the air it came from. And this is something, if you had control of matter, you could do that. You could condense the matter to create a kind of temporary physical form for you, like an avatar. You know, it's not really you, but you're using it. And so you could have this temporary avatar body that you could then let go of and it could dissipate. According to different theologians, these avatar bodies or aerial bodies would have different degrees of functionality depending on the degree of control of matter that the angel would have. So a very powerful angel, now all of them as far as we could tell, would be able to at least imitate a human shape and make it talk like a human, so it could vibrate air molecules, and generate speech, and do basic other human things. A question that came up, though, is could it mate with a human being?
Oh, yeah.
And there have been various figures in the history of Judaism and Christianity who have said, that would be possible. And frankly, I don't know what the limits of angelic control of matter is.
Yeah.
But if they can make a body for themselves, maybe they could make a fully functional one. I don't know. St. Thomas Aquinas, though, was of the opinion that they couldn't. What his proposal was that they could appear as this is a type of angelic manifestation known as a succubus. They could appear as a woman to a man and have relations with the man in order to get the germ cells needed to make a baby, and then appear, this is an angelic manifestation known as an incubus, they could then appear as a man to a woman and transmit those germ cells in order to make a baby, but the baby would still really be the son of a man.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be half demon. At least this is St. Thomas Aquinas' opinion.
That is a lot of detail. So Thomas Aquinas got into that. Luke, I hope that's helpful for you. Thanks very much. Have they thought about how angels would manipulate matter?
The trouble is that we don't have these days we have a robust understanding of the forces that operate in the physical world, because we've been able to study them and measure them and test them. We don't have nearly the same level of study of the spiritual world.
Yeah.
But if you look at what angels can do, they seem to be able to communicate with each other, mind to mind, because they're created intellects.
Right.
They seem to be able to sense things on Earth to interact with us, and they seem to be able to manipulate things on Earth without using a physical body. And so those three abilities, mind-to-mind communication, sensing things without sense organs like eyes, and manipulating matter without things like hands, have parallels in human history. They're called these days telepathy, clairvoyance, and telekinesis.
Oh, yeah.
And they are sometimes claimed by, for example, various parapsychologists to be abilities that humans natively have in their own nature to a weak degree.
Right.
And there have been Catholic theologians who have picked up on that and said, well, in fact, actually in the Middle Ages, there was this idea that, well, basically any ability an angel has, our spirits could potentially exercise when we're out of our bodies, at least. And so there have been even more recent theologians after the development of parapsychology, like the 20th century Swiss theologian Alois Weisinger, who wrote a whole book about this, proposing that that parapsychological phenomena are to be explained as the ability of human spirits to do things in exceptional circumstances. And his proposal was that if we had not fallen, we would have these would be the preternatural gifts, and we would have been able to do these things much more robustly.
How interesting.
And today, what parapsychologists are measuring are essentially the remnants of those abilities in our fallen human nature after the fall into sin.
That is fascinating. Luke, I'm really glad you called and asked that question. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, but telekinesis is the short answer. How they could manipulate matter. Yeah, telekinesis. How does telekinesis work? I don't know.
I thought the answer was going to be the Higgs boson.
Well, it could involve the Higgs boson, but it would be the Higgs boson, for people who may not be aware, is
I'm among those people. I don't know what it is.
There are certain kinds of particles that carry forces. They're known as bosons, and the Higgs boson is involved in giving other particles mass. So there's this Higgs field.
A priest.
Well, no. Different kind of mass.
Oh, okay.
There's this Higgs. The proposal is there's this Higgs field that fills the universe, and the Higgs boson that involves mass and weight, to put it oversimplistically, and the Higgs boson then couples that mass to other particles.
Wow.
And so it's possible that the Higgs boson could be involved if telekinesis is real, but it's not any physics we've discovered at this point.
The world is mysterious, Jimmy. Have you ever noticed this?
I've noticed that.
It is a mysterious world. Jordan in Detroit, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy and Si. Thank you so much for all that you guys do. I'd like to better understand what we mean. I'd like to better understand what we mean by how we can increase in righteousness after the initial state of justification. In other words, like at baptism, by like the grace of God, we're declared righteous, but we're also made righteous 100%. So, like, how can we grow more righteous than 100%?
So in my book, The Drama of Salvation, I use a metaphor that I think can help shed light on this, and I say that as a bit of a pun because it involves light. Light has more than one dimension. Light you can have both a certain quality of light, but then you can also have a certain quantity of light. Now you can imagine, let's say, a teeny little light bulb that emits 100% pure white light. Okay, so
Yes.
it emits pure white light, but that light is not going to broadcast very far because it's just a teeny little light. It doesn't have it doesn't emit a big quantity of light, but it does emit pure light.
Yeah.
Well, then you could imagine a bigger light bulb that also emits 100% pure white light, but has more power. It's got more wattage, so it puts out more total light. And I think that's one of the best ways to understand, or as an analogy, what happens in justification. When we first come to God and are justified, He takes away everything that's truly and properly sin and gives us righteousness, and that's pure righteousness. So in terms of quality, that righteousness is already maxed out. But in terms of quantity, it is not maxed out, and it will continue to grow over the course of the Christian life as we cooperate with God's grace in different ways and do acts of supernatural love, which He then, He gives us His charity. We become more loving people. He pours more of the theological virtue of charity into our souls, and we become more righteous as we become more charitable people. Now, there's a debate in theology about, is the righteousness that we receive the same thing as the charity, or are they distinct in some way? And you have different theologians on different sides. One tradition would say, okay, the righteousness is technically something different than the charity we receive, but they always go together. So the more charity you have, the more righteousness you have. The other position would say, no, the charity itself is just the righteousness.
Okay.
And both of those are legitimate theological opinions.
All right, Jordan?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Jimmy. God bless you.
You too.
Hey, Jordan, you mentioned the Drama of Salvation to him, right?
Yes.
Maybe we could send you the Drama of Salvation. Hang on, and we'll send it to you if you'd like. Thomas will get your information. Chris in Normal, Illinois, listening on EWTN. You got to be quick if you want an answer. Can you do a question quickly?
I can.
What's your
can you hear
question?
me?
Yeah. Yes, please go.
Yes. My question is, why does God allow us to love others and have loving relationships with others, be it friendship, marital, or family, or otherwise, when He alone satisfies our longing for love? Wouldn't it be better? Doesn't our love of others distract us from Him? And wouldn't it be better if we were all just hermits, totally focused on Him and no one else?
God's key priority is love, so you've correctly identified that, but God doesn't love us as individuals to the exclusion of other people. He loves other people too, and as a result, He wants us to love other people, and that means we need to have loving relationships with them. So just like God is able to have relationships with multiple people, even though He realizes He's the most important because He's infinitely good and He knows that, He's built us to also have relationships with multiple people. It is not good for man to be alone. He wants us to be a society and to be families. He wants us to love each other. That's why love your neighbor is the second great commandment. He's built it into us to both have relationships with other people and to have a relationship with Him, which is one where we do need to recognize, okay, He's the most important. That's why love your God is the first great commandment. And so it's essentially an outworking of God's principle of love, and ultimately all of the love we show for God's creatures implicitly is love for God, because He's the one who's responsible for those creatures being there and being able to have loving relationships with us.
Chris, thank you for asking your question quickly. I hope that answer was helpful to you. Open forum will continue. Mark Brumley from Ignatius Press will be here to take your questions. So if you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't dialed yet, there are lines open. 888 318-7884. Whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Tomorrow morning, new episode, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World drops.
And tomorrow afternoon, I'll be back in the second hour to answer more Q&A.
Oh, very good. Okay, great. We'll see you then, Jimmy. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, right back with more Open Forum and Mark Brumley on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and very grateful you are here with us. Thanks for being here with us. As we promised, Open Forum continues this hour. Mark Brumley is our guest. Mark is president of Ignatius Press. Probably, I'm going to say, the most important publishing house in the entire Alpha Quadrant. Hello, Mark Brumley.
Hey, how are you doing, sir?
Really well. Oh, nice to see you. See, now I can see you.
Now you can see me. I
once
see you too.
Start talking, your video comes on. I don't know why it works that way, but
all the people on the radio can't see us, but we can see each other, and
but that's what
social
counts.
media people can see us.
Yeah,
isn't that wonderful?
The number's 888-318-7884. There's 3 lines open. So if you've got a question about the Catholic faith, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're in agreement with the Catholic faith and just would like to understand it better, or if there's something that you don't agree with and you'd like to hash it out with us, 888-318-7884. As the president of Ignatius Press, you must be awful proud. Constantly new stuff coming out that's good, high quality stuff. What do you got now?
Yeah, and I want to mention some things. You and I have been having conversations. I think we did a Catholic Answers podcast on the topic of fiction, and we've had some conversations on this program about fiction. We actually have several novels coming out this fall, but we have 2 that have recently come out, and I want to mention them in connection with apologetics and a concept which the term I use hesitantly with respect to these books, because I know authors' sensitivity, and I want to be respectful of that.
I see.
The term I want to use is narrative apologetics. Are you familiar with that term?
I'm not. No, I don't think I know narrative apologetics.
Okay, well, narrative apologetics is a term used to refer to an apologetical use of narrative, especially fiction. Okay, so fiction. So you use fiction as a way of defending the faith, or responding to objections regarding the faith, showing the credibility of the faith, all of the kinds of moves, as they say, that are involved with apologetics. Now, narrative apologetics is the kind of thing that I think we see in C.S. Lewis's famous space trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength. It's the kind of thing that we see, just to some degree, even in terms of general credibility or plausibility of the Christian worldview in the broad sense, we see in Lord of the Rings, and a number of other works of fiction that have a certain kind of apologetical function. Now, why do I hesitate to use this out of due regard for authors? Well, they don't want their fiction to be understood as primarily about an apologetical argument. You're a fiction writer. You don't want people to think, I'm just telling this story to, try to win an argument or to make an argument. I'm telling this story because I love the story, I love the characters, I love the plot, and if it helps illuminate some aspect of reality, including the Christian aspects of reality, which ultimately God is the ultimate reality, so it's all about that. Well, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm not opposed to that. But, that's not really why I'm writing. So that's a lot of fiction writers are sensitive to that. So this is all prefaced to say we've just come out with 2 books. I think I've mentioned these before, and they are very offbeat. They are fantasy bordering on horror. Catholic novelists. One is called This Thing of Darkness by K.V. Turley and Fiorella de Maria. I'm holding it up for the people who are on the radio and don't have the visual here. And this is a really macabre story about Hollywood, 1956, Bela Lugosi, and all kinds of supernatural things around Bela Lugosi and his background. And it's very eerie, and it's also very Catholic. So This Thing of Darkness, K.V. Turley, Fiorella de Maria. So people who like kind of scary, fiction-y, fantasy stuff, you're going to love this book. It's got endorsements by Joseph Pierce, Michael O'Brien, Sally Reed, various other people. So that's one book that we've come out with. Then another is a book called Providence Blue, a fantasy quest. And if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, or Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, or Edgar Allan Poe. These are all characters that figure in this book. Again, I'm holding up the book for the people who can see this online, Providence Blue. And it's also, as I say, a kind of fantasy bordering on horror Catholic story. So there's Catholic elements to it and so on. Again, it's got great plugs by Ron Hansen. Many of the people out there will know Ron Hansen, the novelist Ron Hansen. Eleanor Nicholson, who wrote our book A Bloody Habit, which was about a priest, vampire hunter, and Father Weta, who wrote The Eighth Arrow, which is about Odysseus trying to escape from Dante's hell, and so on. So these books, what do these books have in common other than being great works of fiction and exciting reads and all of that, and fantasy works? They give insight into the Catholic worldview, and they help readers see the credibility of the Catholic perspective.
I'm so glad you're publishing those books, because it just seems like there was a time when the Catholic author was a welcome part of the mainstream of authors. The
Yes.
Graham Greene time and Evelyn Waugh and all that. But
Flannery O'Connor. Right.
It seems like the Catholic author is not welcome in the New Yorker circles anymore. The person who's a serious Catholic. So you got to have a venue for those. Right. And when people discover them, they'll discover that. I'm sure they'll discover very, very fine fiction that otherwise is just not. It doesn't have a place.
Right, and I would say about these books, because I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy stuff, among other things. I would say these are good books to read if you had no faith perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They're interesting stories, and they're not propaganda. That's why I want to underscore that point when we talk about. So I use this expression, narrative apologetics, but again, they're not propaganda. They're just good books to read and interesting books to read with great stories and plots and exciting characters and narratives and all of that. But they also have this other element or quality to them, in that they help see the credibility of the Christian worldview.
I love it. I feel like we Catholics, we lost our place in the culture that we had, I don't know, back before the John Kennedy days and leading up to that. And little by little, people are finding ways to recarve our place in the culture, and I think that's great.
Yes, absolutely.
Want to do some calls?
Yeah, let's go to the calls.
All right, it's open forum, 888-318-7884, the number. James in Ohio, watching on YouTube. You are first, and I know you've been very patient, James, from the last hour over, so thanks for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Mark Brumley.
No problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so question I'd like to ask is about it's partly about God's character, but it's specifically about in the Levitical law, in Leviticus 18, where there's different death penalty sanctions by God giving it to the Israelites, and of course the one controversial one is with regards to homosexuality. Man shall not lie with a man, and so forth. Their blood shall be on their head, and they shall be put to death. I'm wondering, basically, I know some people have argued about whether or not that's the same thing of our understanding of homosexuality today, but irregardless of that, my main question is, how is this consistent with God supposing to be all good and moral? It seems like a rather extreme reaction to something that you would find morally unethical. Like, why not just have a conversation with people if you're God instead of just sentence them to death?
Okay. James, you know what? I'm going to let Mark answer that, just because we're getting on and we need to get an answer before the break. So you get the idea, though. Why would God do that?
We'll try to answer during the break. So this is a view that many people who approach Scripture in the Catholic tradition, how they would handle this question, and they would see that God, over a period of time, progressively reveals himself to people, that as a result of human sin and the conditions that came with that, human beings were, our ideas about the world and about right and wrong and our ability to live well with one another all these things were affected by sin, early sin, sin of the human race. And that includes our ability to understand God's will, God's love, and God's justice. And so God sort of treated humanity like little children, okay, and brought them along. And that included the kind of severity that sometimes children interpret when they are corrected or directed by their parents to do certain things and not do certain things. And so that's how I would see God's revelation in the Old Testament, not just regarding homosexuality. Even if you go back and you see how disobedient children are treated under the Mosaic Law, it's rather severe as well. And this is early revelation, how people of that day experienced and interpreted early revelation from God about moral rightness and moral wrongness. But as Christians, we don't look back to how God revealed himself and was interpreted by Moses 3,000 years ago. We look to Jesus Christ, and he is our pattern for understanding the fullness, the full revelation of who God is, how God is just and loving. And so I look to the example. This is an example. It's not an example of homosexuality, but it is an example of the application of the death penalty to serious moral sin, or serious sin, I should say. The woman caught in adultery. According to the Old Testament law, she was supposed to be stoned, put to death. And what did Jesus say when he encountered her? Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. In other words, you folks are not in a position to pass judgment on her as you think you are. He corrected her, and he said, don't do this anymore. But he also said that she was forgiven. Now, sometimes people use this passage in another conversation about the death penalty, where they're moving from the realm of morality to the realm of civil law, which I think is a dubious transition, but focusing on this question of the commandments of the death penalty and so on for homosexuality in the Old Testament, we say the same thing applies there with respect to homosexuality as applied to adultery. Jesus shows us how we should think about this. It's sinful, it's wrong to engage in same-sex sexual acts, just as it's sinful and wrong to engage in opposite sex, heterosexual acts with someone when you're married to someone else, or that person is married to someone else. These things are seriously wrong. They're contrary to God's purpose for us and contrary to our true fulfillment and happiness. But that doesn't mean we need to apply the death penalty. Now, I'm going to mention one other point that we need to bear in mind, and that is anytime we choose to put some created thing, some finite reality, whether it's another person or it's a thing or it's our own will, before the ultimate reality of God and the supreme being and the supremely good and the supremely true and the supremely beautiful and the supremely loving, anytime we do that, we set ourselves up in a relationship of opposition to our own true fulfillment and our own experience of ultimate goodness. In other words, we put ourselves in a position of death, not necessarily physical death, but spiritual death, because God is the source of life, and the opposite of life is death. And if we turn away from God, who is the source of our life, we put ourselves in a position of death. And that's what sin does. In the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, when they disobeyed God, what did they do? They experienced death. And not just the coming into the world of physical death for human beings, but the coming into the world of spiritual death, finding themselves at odds with God, who is the source of life. And what's the solution? Well, to turn from death to life. And who makes that possible? Jesus Christ makes that possible for us. And when we enter into a relationship with Christ, by the transforming power of God and the grace of God, he turns our hearts away from these other things that are put in the place of God to God, who is the source of our life. So I think that's the best way to think about whether you're talking about homosexuality and it being gravely sinful, or sex outside of marriage, it being gravely sinful, or adultery, it being gravely sinful. Those are all areas dealing with human sexuality. But we could talk about other areas, whether you're talking about sins of murder or sins of hatred. All these things turn us away from God, who is the source of life, and they turn us towards some form of spiritual death. And Jesus came for us to overcome that so that we don't have to experience that. So that's what I would say. I know that's a long answer to your question, but I try to put it into a overall kind of theological context.
And James, we'll have to let that stand. I hope that was helpful. We got to take a quick break. Be right back with more Open Forum with Mark Brumley on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connection's set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connection's website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The power of prayer simply means that words have an effect. For example, when a couple says, "I do," it literally changes two people to becoming one in marriage. When you say, "I love you," it changes us and it gives us value. The power of prayer is in the words and in the sentiment, but it's also in the fact that God, who is omnipotent, all-powerful, answers our prayers.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Open Forum. Mark Brumley is our guest, going back to the phones, but I am excited to tell you this, and I keep putting it off, and I haven't said it the whole program. We have a new free ebook this month, for the month of September, a brand new free ebook, and it's from our good friend and former chaplain, Father Hugh Barber, and anything he writes, you're going to want to read it, but this one's really good. 5 ways to prepare for communion. You can download it free at shop.catholic.com. 5 ways to prepare for communion from our own Father Hugh Barber at shop.catholic.com.
5 ways, huh?
Yeah, 5 ways to prepare for communion. One of them, get up, brush your hair.
That's true. So before go to the next call, I want to ask you a question about the last call.
Okay.
And I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay, put me on the spot.
What did you think about that answer? So I was trying to put the question about homosexuality and capital punishment into a broader context. And sometimes that works for apologetics, and then sometimes it just falls flat.
Well, no, and maybe it fell flat for the caller. I don't ever worry too much about that, because you win some, you lose some, as long as I was very happy when I heard you start talking about the woman caught in adultery, because that's the obvious New Testament place to go to get an insight into what God really teaches us about taking life for these moral infractions. So that I was very, very pleased. I didn't know I get to rate your answers now. So
you don't get to rate them in general, but I just was kind of curious because you do this every day, and you hear various apologists, myself included, give answers.
Yeah,
and I'm just curious.
Every day I see, sometimes I will see an answer where I think, as a matter of fact, Father Hugh had one this week where I think, you just couldn't answer that better than that. And the person utterly rejected the answer. No, that's not, and so you go, well, okay, but that was a great answer if you're ready to hear it. So
that's one of the deadly sins of apologetics is to assume that, you will grant me that I gave a cogent, solid argument there. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the deadly sins is to presume that anytime you give a cogent, solid argument, that you're going to persuade.
No,
and
that's
of course,
right.
It doesn't follow at all.
No. As a matter of fact, sometimes you can give I've heard people just give an answer where you go, oh, it just makes me as a believing Christian feel so inspired. Nothing for the person who gets the answer. Zero. There are, by the way, 7 deadly sins of apologetics. I think that you know this, Mark, because you're the author of a book called 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics. So,
my mistakes and how you can learn from them. That's what the subtitle should be. There's a different subtitle.
My mistakes.
My mistakes and how you can learn from them.
Yeah, you can get that too at shop.catholic.com.
Well, I just mentioned, I wanted to ask you that question because there's kind of a move in apologetics now, at least I'm observing it, to be much more, and I mentioned this earlier in the context of fiction, narrative apologetics, with respect to writing, fiction as a kind of undergirding an apologetical vision. But more generally, sort of a testimonial approach to apologetics, where you're trying to help people enter into the story of God's reality as the church presents it. And that requires more of a conversation and
yes, I think that's generally
something more. Anyway, I just mentioned that. Just kind of curious.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to hold up the show here.
No, you didn't hold up the show. No, opportunities for me to talk are very rare on this program, and I value them.
All right,
Elizabeth in Oklahoma City, you're next. Go ahead with your question for Mark Brumley.
Hi, I have a friend who is not Catholic. But he believes in the transubstantiation. However, he believes that he can just pray over his Protestant Eucharist, and it becomes the body and blood of Christ. And and I'm not sure how to adequately explain how transubstantiation happens because of apostolic succession.
I see. Okay, so when you say he can pray over his elements of communion in his church, you mean he's a pastor, or is he just a member of the congregation?
Just a member of the congregation.
Okay, so the pastor or the ministers in the church, they distribute the elements of communion, and he prays over them, and he thinks his praying over them will turn them into the body and blood of Christ.
Yes, he's been to Mass many times, and I don't know what he prays, but I'm assuming he probably prays the same prayers that he hears the priest pray.
Maybe.
Right. Okay. Well, what I would say to this is, certainly in the Scripture, Jesus is speaking to the apostles. He tells them to do this in his memory, and we know from history that priests, presbyters, elders were the people who presided over the Eucharistic celebration. And so, my question for him would be, where does he, I would try to not phrase this in an unduly provocative way, but where does he think he, as just an individual Christian, gets the authority, the apostolic authority, to act with the authority of Jesus Christ when it comes to the Eucharist? Where does he get that from? It's wonderful that he has the insight that communion is something more than a mere symbol, and that it is the reality of communion for the Christian is that it's the body and blood of Christ. It's a participation in the body and blood of Christ. But I would challenge him on the basis upon which he thinks that he, just as an individual, has the power to make Christ's present body, blood, soul, and divinity, when certainly, if we go back to the earliest Christian records of this, it's clearly it's the bishop and the presbyter, that is to say, the divinely ordained leader of that community, the community of believers, who exercises this function, I should say, through whom Christ himself exercises this function. So that's what I would ask him, and I think that's a good way to proceed.
Does that work, Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you.
All right. And who's the little one with you?
My son.
Oh, For a second, I thought, you know what I thought it was? I thought it was the tornado warning. Because I know you have that in Oklahoma. I was like, no, that's a baby. But that's
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead.
Well, I hear the sound of the music.
And that means we've got to take a quick break. Thanks, Elizabeth. More on the line. It's open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press, the most important publisher in the Alpha Quadrant. We'll be right back with more of your questions. And there's 2 lines open, 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Groovy music on this Thursday afternoon. Maybe it's Friday morning where you are. We already got one call from Friday morning, but it's maybe Thursday evening wherever you are. We're just happy you're here and happy to share the groovy music. And Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press, and me, your host, Cy Kellett. I have to say it slow sometimes because people think my name is Psych. Psych. They go, "Who is Psych Ellett?" And
Psych Ellett?
Yeah. So
well, who is he?
My name's it's not me, but that's what my name sounds like when I say it fast. 888-318-7884, the number, and it's not a really good day until you get a call from Nebraska. Michelle in York, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. You are up next, Michelle. Go ahead with your question for Mark Brumley.
Great, thanks for taking my call.
Happy to.
My question is, I was at our Catholic bookstore lately, and there were different versions of the Catechism of the Catholic Faith. I have one, I think that is the title. It's just Catechism of the Catholic Faith. And then I saw some that were like Baltimore Catechism, and I was just wondering why there are different versions and which one we're supposed to be using.
What kind of a crazy Catholic bookstore is there? Mark, why do we have all these catechisms?
Okay, so there are major catechisms and there are minor catechisms or secondary catechisms. The major catechisms, there's actually been 2. There's what's called the Roman Catechism, or so-called Catechism of the Council of Trent, and there's the Catechism of the Catholic Church, a copy which I'm holding up right now. And major catechisms are, as I said, there's only been 2, and they are summary documents. So the Catechism of the Catholic the Council of Trent, the so-called Roman Catechism. That was after the Council of Trent in the 16th century, and over a period of time, it's not that the faith changes, but certain things get clarified and teachings get presented in different ways, and things that were presented as true but not necessarily as dogma get clarified as dogma. And so there's a need to update, to restate, to present different ways over time, and various church documents get issued and so on. So the Catechism of the Council of Trent, a Roman Catechism, got replaced, if you will, or updated by the what we call now the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which came out in the early 90s and following the Second Vatican Council. So that's a major catechism, and it's really the standard reference point now if you want to know what the Catholic Church teaches. There are, as I say, lesser catechisms or minor catechisms, and these are books that are written based upon the catechism, the major catechism, to try to explain the faith to different groups. So we have, for example, at Ignatius Press, we publish a thing called YOUCAT, which is short for Youth Catechism, and it's based upon the major catechism, of the Catholic Church, but it's written in a way that's more accessible for young people. There are other catechisms published by different groups and different people. Sometimes they're private catechisms, sometimes they're official catechisms. For example, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops published a catechism for the United States of America that's based upon the Catechism of the Catholic Church for the whole church. Catechism, U.S. Catechism for adults, incorporates things like little vignettes from American saints and restates things in ways that the drafters of the catechism think be more accessible to adults living in the United States and that sort of thing. So there are lots of different reasons why the teaching of the catechism, the major catechism, gets restated in other kinds of catechetical writings or things called catechisms. Sometimes it's to reach out to a particular age group, like young people. Sometimes it's to reach out to a particular national group, like Americans. It can be to feature certain aspects of the faith, to emphasize certain dimensions of the faith. So, for example, there's a book out there called the Business Catechism, where the teaching of the church that pertains to business is summarized and expressed. So, and there are official catechisms that come from the church in some official capacity, and there are other catechisms. We have, for example, a book called Catholic Christianity by Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft is a popular Catholic writer, and he takes the teaching of the Catechism of the Catholic Church and he presents it in his own way. It's a unofficial catechism. It's consistent with the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but it's not issued by an official expression of the magisterium of the church. So those are some of the reasons why you're going to have different versions of things called catechisms published under the auspices of Catholics. Does that help, Michelle?
Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. While you were at that Catholic bookstore, did you happen to see a book called A Teacher of Strange Things or another book called 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics? Did they have either of those?
Yes, actually they did.
That's a good...
As an aside, when I started my kind of faith journey, 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics was one of the first ones I bought. And
cool.
One of the last books I just bought was Teacher of Strange Things. So there you go.
You're the best. Michelle, you are the best. Wait, we have a new book coming out, and I'm going to give it to you before you can buy it because you are so good. I want to give you Steve Weidenkopf's book, Light from Darkness. 9 times the Catholic Church was in turmoil and came out stronger than before. That's the newest book from Catholic Answers Press, so you get it before anybody else. Okay, Michelle?
Oh, my gosh, I love that.
All right, Thomas, will you send her that book, Light from Darkness? All right, we're going to put you on hold. Michelle, she's all right.
Well, yeah,
she bought our books, your book and my book. She bought them.
Yeah, isn't it great? And it's funny because you mentioned Teacher of Strange Things. I'm just looking at the summer sale catalog from Ignatius Press, and what do I see?
Is it in there?
A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy Kellett.
Wow.
There it is.
Man, I'm having a great day. Michelle made me happy. We got to go. Let's go to New Mexico now. Michael in New Mexico, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM satellite radio channel 130. Michael, thank you so much for your call. Oh no, Mike! As soon as I said it, Michael dropped. Come on, I got to do better than that. It wasn't me. I didn't push the wrong button. Ben in San Antonio, Texas, listening on 89.7 FM. Ben, we're glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Mark Brumley.
Good afternoon, Mark. I was calling because I was interested in the discussion on fantasy and literature and outreach. I often hear fantasy elements used as a tool for evangelization, but I also hear a lot of rallying against fantasy elements in literature, especially mainstream things like Harry Potter or maybe Dungeons and Dragons. Do you have any additional clarification or follow-up on why those particular fantasy things tend to be rallied against as opposed to other portrayals of fantasy elements in
Those two in particular, Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons?
Yes.
Okay. Mark, do you have a view on why those are controversial?
So Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game, right? And Harry Potter is a book, or a series of books, just to make that distinction. Opinions vary among faithful, committed Catholics about things like Harry Potter, and even among Ignatius Press authors, and I'm sure there's a similar thing at Catholic Answers, there are opinions that differ on this. So with respect to Harry Potter, we have Michael O'Brien, who is himself an outstanding Catholic novelist and has elements of fantasy in some of his stories. He's a very strong critic of Harry Potter, and I think it's because in his view, Harry Potter, because it positively depicts the use of witchcraft, wizardry, he thinks that it's apt to seduce people or confuse young people so that they think things like wizardry and witchcraft are real and good, and he will make the point that they're not real in the sense that they are not what they seem to be, and that they are bad because they are associated with diabolical sources, diabolical origins. So, and I think Michael would represent that take on things. There are other Catholic writers who have a different view of Harry Potter. They see this as fictional magic, that it's not intended to be taken seriously. It's not depicted as a serious thing, and it's not seen as having its origin in the occult and so on. I think probably even people that are more favorable to Harry Potter would say, well, you still have to be cautious. First of all, anytime you're dealing with fantasy fiction and fantasy materials, or even science fiction, there's a certain caution you have to have, because, especially with young people, because young people oftentimes are not adequately equipped to distinguish what's real from what's pretend. And so when you're dealing with fantastical things, whether it's fantasy fiction or science fiction, sometimes young people can be misled and get caught up in things that are harmful to them because they don't always adequately distinguish fact from fantasy. So on the Harry Potter thing, I see elements of both sides. I myself have read all the Harry Potter books. I would not discourage sufficiently mature young people from reading them, because I think there's a lot of good things in them. But I also understand why other people feel that they're too dangerous or they're problematic, and therefore they don't recommend them. So I can see both sides of that. I think the same thing, by the way. This would be a point where Michael and I would disagree. When I was in Michael O'Brien and I would disagree. When I was in high school and I was an evangelical Christian, before I became a Catholic, I was very suspicious of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Why? Well, because Gandalf is a wizard, and he obviously uses wizardry and uses supernatural powers to do various things, and there are all kinds of things that I regarded as occultic things in the Lord of the Rings. And besides, all the people I knew who liked Lord of the Rings or who liked The Hobbit when I was in high school were into drugs, So I just associated this with drug culture and hippies and all kinds of stuff. Now that
Led Zeppelin.
dates me, shows you how far back I go. And then, as an evangelical Christian, I was very suspicious of that. And I later found out that Tolkien, that when I discovered he was a Catholic, I was like, well, that figures. He would be in the occult, right? Did I mention I was an anti-Catholic evangelical at this point? Anyway.
You didn't say anti-Catholic, but yeah, we get the idea.
But I was pretty anti-Catholic. But, C.S. Lewis won me over. Chronicles of Narnia won me over. And then I found out that Tolkien was a friend of Lewis's, and I kind of softened on my Catholicism. And I actually read The Hobbit, and I read Lord of the Rings, and it clicked. I saw, no, he's not promoting the occult, and Gandalf is a wizard, but and he's a kind of supernatural being. He's kind of an angelic, low-level angelic sort of being, and it's not intended to be, perfectly consistent with all aspects of Christian revelation and so on. And it was just a fun story of good versus evil. It as I said earlier, when I talked about narrative apologetics, it created a fictional space where I think some people can be more open to the Christian perspective, and I, as an evangelical Christian at that point, found it as something that opened me up to a more sacramental view of Christianity, and therefore more of an openness to Catholicism. So that's an example. Do I think Lord of the Rings is occult and diabolical because it's got a wizard in it? No. Do I think there are people that misread it, misuse it, and have gotten into bad things as a result of it? Yeah, because I knew people in high school who did that. So we have to be cautious about these things. By the way, the same can be said of non-fantasy fiction as well. There are people who read novels that have elements in them that lead to all kinds of wrong ideas and immorality, and so people need to exercise good judgment about what they read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and when it's fiction, whether it's fantasy or other kinds of fiction.
Thanks, Ben. We got to go take a quick break, so we will do that. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Mark Brumley on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Isn't it awesome that we today do not recognize His presence in the Eucharist? Is it because we really don't go to Him in humbleness of heart and say, Lord, I don't believe, help my unbelief. Lord, I want to see you. I want to recognize you. I cannot live without you. Are we saying that?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Mark Brumley is our guest, and up next is Margaret in Iowa, listening on 94.5 FM. Margaret, you there with us? Maybe not. I really thought Margaret was going to say...
What are you, dumping callers today?
No, I'm not. I think I'm making them wait for a long time, but I heard Margaret's dog.
I'm making them wait, but...
Margaret, is it maybe making herself a cup of coffee? She's like,
yes, I'm here.
Oh, Margaret, you're there with us. How are you?
Yes, I'm here. I'm fine, thank you.
Great. It's great to talk with you. Go ahead with your question for Mark Brumley.
Yeah, my question is about St. Joseph. While in Africa, I was working for ecumenism with the Muslims, And one of the imams gave me the Quran, and in some verses of the Quran, it talks about Joseph, not as husband of Mary, but that he took care of Mary, that he had his own family and took care of Mary when Mary was expecting Jesus, and he never married her. But as Catholics, we believe that Joseph is the spouse of Mary, and that has been kind of...
So do you want to know what the Catholic Church believes about whether or not Joseph was married to Mary?
Yeah, I know that we believe that Joseph is the husband of Mary, but just getting the clarity between the Muslim belief and the Catholic belief.
Yeah, so how might you respond to a Muslim, Mark, who said Joseph wasn't married to Mary?
Right, so there's a broader conversation about where we go for our information about Mary and Joseph and Jesus and God. And the Muslim is going to go to the Quran, and a Christian is going to go to the Bible, which includes the New Testament and the Gospels and so on. And so we would have to have a conversation about whether we have good reason for thinking the Quran tells us something more reliable about Joseph and Mary and Jesus than what the Gospels tell us. And I'm going to say we don't have any good reason. In fact, we have reason to think that the Quran is not a reliable source of information. If for no other reason, the fact that the Quran came into existence, in the 7th century. I know that a Muslim will claim that it's, divinely revealed and so on, but that's not a claim that I'm just going to take at face value, because I can claim, as Christians do claim, that the New Testament is divinely inspired. Okay, so we look at which sources, Matthew and Luke and John, those are the 3 Gospels that refer to, all 4 Gospels in some way or another bring in Mary and Joseph, but talk about the relationship of Mary and Joseph, especially the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. These things were written within a single human lifetime, okay? So they're not coming many, many centuries after the time they purport to depict. The Gospels were written within 30, 40, 50 years, maybe 60 at most, of the time of the events that they're written that they represent and depict. What's more, we have a fairly good understanding of how the traditions about Jesus and his parents got transferred and conveyed to the wider church. We have very little idea about the source, humanly speaking, of these traditions that are in the Quran. The only thing we have is a claim by the followers of Muhammad that these are of divine origin, and there's no claim to historical reliability and so on. If you open up the Gospel of Luke, you'll see right out of the bat, Luke claims to have investigated the matters that he is writing about. We don't have anything like that in the Quran. So just looking at it from simply from a perspective of historical evidence, there's much more credibility that the Gospels have regarding Jesus and his family relations than what the Quran has. Now, I'm not here to trash talk Muslims. I'm just simply saying that when we compare these things, we see that there's historical credibility for what the Gospels say about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and there's no historical basis for what the Quran says, and the Quran comes 600, 700 years after the time of Jesus and the events that the Gospel writers depict with respect to Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Okay, Margaret?
Okay, yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah,
it's like the difference between, somebody living in the 13th century the 1200s, writing about something that happened in the 1200s, having access to people who lived at that time, getting their testimony and their accounts of what happened in the 1200s, and someone today coming out of the blue saying, I've got a revelation from God. This is what happened in the 1200s.
Yeah, that's exactly
really,
what it is like.
A comparison. So I hope that's helpful, Margaret.
Margaret, you said you had these conversations with Muslims in Africa. Where are you from in Africa?
I'm originally from Kenya, and I was studying Justice and Peace in Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and I was working with the ecumenism.
Oh, well, wonderful. Now you live in Iowa.
Yes, I live in Iowa.
Very cool.
Wonderful.
Very cool.
That's great.
I feel like the weather might be better in Kenya. I don't know, though. I'm not sure. Less snow.
Yeah, but of course, James Kirk is not going to be from Kenya.
Oh,
Probably other great people in the Federation will be from.
Wait, James
Kenya,
Kirk is from Iowa?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Margaret, do you even know who James Kirk is? Do you have any idea what we're talking about?
No,
because it's an American television show from the 1960s. All right. It was very pleasant
Margaret,
to talk with you.
thank you for your patience with me. I appreciate it.
I know, really. Mark. All right, let's see if let's go to Harry in Salem, Massachusetts, the very heart of world culture.
Harry from Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah, Harry from Salem, Massachusetts.
Hi, Harry.
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Very good.
Fine.
I have a question about lukewarmness. I'm trying to make sure that I'm on the right track with my lifestyle. I go to confession and Mass every Sunday, and I quit smoking pot and cigarettes, and I basically don't even drink anymore. I just probably have a few drinks if I go to a wedding or something, but I don't get drunk or anything. And I don't swear anything. I'm trying to read the Bible in a Year program. I don't read it, but it's being read to me by Father Michael Schmitz.
Oh, wow.
So I'm involved in that, just so I can say I completed that.
But
so
you're worried that you're lukewarm.
Yeah, I don't want to be lukewarm. Just want to make sure I'm on the right track,
Boy, listening to you, Harry, makes me wonder. Harry?
I'm praying like crazy,
You're praying like crazy. Well, that doesn't sound lukewarm, but Mark?
Harry, you make me worried that I'm lukewarm. I hear all the stuff that you're doing.
I don't know, but I was praying 4 rosaries a day, and plus I'm praying about 12 to 15 saints a day, and the Blessed Virgin Mary, Sacred Heart of Jesus, Sacred Heart of Mary. I'm praying all these a day now. You know what it is? Once I started doing the rosary every day, my prayer life started picking up, doing more and more and more every day, and I keep adding more things to it.
And you're praying for people? Are you praying for other people?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I am. I pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy every day. Every day. I used to do 4 rosaries a day. I got too much, so I cut back to just 1 rosary a day. I do the Chaplet of Divine Mercy every day. I'm praying for the world. I'm praying for the president. I'm praying for the country. I'm praying for my family every day.
Holy smokes, Harry.
Harry, that sounds great. Yeah. So, do you love God?
Oh, I love God. Yes, so absolutely.
Do you want to love Him more?
Yeah.
Do you want to spend eternity with Him?
Absolutely. That's
do you want to avoid things that displease God?
Yes, I do, and I've been doing that.
Then I don't think you need to worry about lukewarmness. I think you should thank God
What are some of the things you think people who need to worry about lukewarmness do that they could be in trouble?
Well, they're not doing 4 rosaries a day and going to confession every Sunday.
Right.
Every Saturday.
I'd say that people who don't pray, there's a real serious risk of lukewarmness. They don't go to Mass. They don't go to confession. They're not taken seriously. Following Jesus.
And also, you're just inspiring to hear. You can hear it in your voice. I feel inspired by you, Harry. And so I'm super grateful for your call. Thomas, let's give Harry any Catholic Answers book he wants. Any Catholic Answers book he wants. Because that's how I feel about Harry. Thomas is rolling his eyes because that's work for him at the end of the show. Thomas, you're lukewarm. Stop being lukewarm.
Don't be lukewarm, Thomas.
Mark Brumley, it's always such a pleasure. President of Ignatius Press, the author of 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
All right.
God bless you.
We'll see you next time. And we'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.